What if I told you that right now, somewhere in Forgotten Ward, there might still be someone who's been frozen in the same position since 1920, fully aware, fully conscious, but unable to move, speak, or scream? Welcome to the nightmare of Encephalitis Lethargica. Between 1915 and 1926, a mysterious illness swept across the world like a silent plague. It infected over 1 million people. It killed a third of them. But death wasn't the worst outcome. The survivors faced something far more terrifying. Imagine falling asleep one night with a mild fever. You wake up the next morning, but you can't quite wake up completely. Your eyelids feel like lead. Your limbs won't respond. Days pass. Weeks pass. And slowly, inexorably, your body begins to freeze. Not from cold. Not from paralysis. From something else entirely. Something medicine still can't fully explain. They called it the sleeping sickness. But that name doesn't capture the true horror. They were trapped. The epidemic appeared without warning in 1915, during the chaos of World War I. At first, doctors thought it was a new form of influenza. The world was already drowning in disease. But this was different. This was something darker. Patients would develop a fever, headaches, and overwhelming fatigue. Then came the sleep. Some patients slept for days, weeks, even months. When they woke, if they woke, they weren't the same. Others never slept at all. They developed a horrifying insomnia that made fatal familial insomnia look merciful by comparison. They would go weeks without sleep, their minds fragmenting, their bodies convulsing, until finally their hearts gave out from exhaustion. But here's where it gets worse. The ones who survived the acute phase, the ones who doctors thought had recovered, they were just entering the first stage of a living nightmare that would last decades. In the years following the recovery, survivors began to change. Their movements became slow, deliberate, mechanical. Their faces froze into masks, expressionless and empty. Their bodies locked into positions, some bent forward at unnatural angles, some twisted to the side, some frozen mid-gesture, reaching for something that would never come. They became statues, living statues, trapped inside bodies that wouldn't obey them, minds fully intact, screaming silently behind frozen faces. Imagine being locked inside your own body for 40 years, every second feeling like an eternity, unable to scratch an itch, unable to shift positions, unable to tell anyone that you're still in there, still aware, still suffering. That's exactly what happened to thousands of survivors scattered in institutions across the world. In the 1960s, a neurologist named Oliver Sacks encountered these forgotten patients at Beth Abraham Hospital in New York. What he found haunts medical literature to this day. Patients who had been frozen since the 1920s. 40 years in the same position. 40 years of awareness trapped in unresponsive flesh. One woman had been reaching for a glass of water since 1926. Her eyes still fixed on the spot where the glass had been. She watched the world change through those eyes for 4 decades, unable to move, unable to communicate, unable to die. Another patient had been frozen mid-stride, balanced impossibly on one foot for 30 years. The institution had built a support frame around him just to keep him from falling. His family had died. The world had moved on, but he remained suspended in that single eternal step. Sacks tried an experimental treatment, a drug called L-DOPA. What happened next is somehow even more disturbing than the paralysis itself. The patients woke up. After decades frozen in silence, they suddenly returned. They moved. They spoke. They remembered everything. Every single day. Every single hour of their imprisonment in flesh. One patient, after awakening, described it as being buried alive in slow motion. Another said it felt like being trapped in thick glass, watching the world but unable to touch it. But here's the nightmare within the nightmare. The awakening didn't last. The L-DOPA worked for weeks, sometimes months. The patients rediscovered movement, speech, emotion. They reconnected with a world that had forgotten them. They laughed, cried, raged at the decades stolen from them. And then, gradually, they began to freeze again. Some would cycle between frozen and awake states, experiencing the horror of imprisonment over and over again, each awakening bringing hope, each refreezing bringing despair that would have broken anyone who wasn't already shattered. Worse still, some patients develop what Sachs called kinematic hallucinations. Their frozen bodies would remain still, but their minds would experience phantom movement. They would feel themselves walking, running, dancing, while their actual bodies remained utterly motionless. Can you imagine that? Your mind moving freely while your body stays frozen? The disconnect alone could drive someone mad. The cause of encephalitis lethargica remains unknown to this day. It appeared suddenly in 1915. It vanished just as mysteriously in 1926. Nearly a century later, we still don't know what caused it, how it spread, or why it stopped. Some researchers believe it was an autoimmune response triggered by a virus. Others think it might have been related to the influenza pandemic. A few suggest environmental factors we still don't understand. But here's what keeps neurologists awake at night. There's no evidence it's actually gone. Sporadic cases still appear. Rare, isolated, often misdiagnosed. A child who slowly freezes after a mild illness. An adult who develops the characteristic frozen stare and mechanical movements. The disease might still be out there, waiting, and we still have no cure. We still don't fully understand what trapped those people in their own bodies. We still don't know if the survivors in Sachs' study were truly aware during their frozen decades, or that awareness was something that returned only with the L-DOPA. We don't know if there are still patients, forgotten in some institution somewhere, frozen and aware, waiting for someone to realize they're still in there. The last known survivor of the original epidemic died in 2009, but their nightmare lives on in medical journals, in case studies, in the archives of psychiatric hospitals. And in one final, chilling detail that researchers discovered when examining the frozen patients, their eyes, even when completely immobile, even when frozen for decades, their eyes would sometimes move, slowly, tracking movement across a room, following nurses, watching visitors, following you, because the most terrifying part isn't that these people were frozen. It's that they were frozen and aware, conscious prisoners in their own flesh. For years, for decades, every second an eternity, every minute an hour, every day a lifetime of silence and stillness. So tonight, when you lie down to sleep, be grateful. Be grateful that when you wake up tomorrow, you'll be able to move, to speak, to touch, to scream if you need to. Because somewhere in medical history, there are people who lost that ability and never got it back. People who lived entire lifetimes in the space between one breath and the next. And the disease that did this to them, it's still out there, still unexplained, still capable of returning, still waiting to turn you into a statue that thinks, feels, and remembers. Sweet dreams.